Chapter 1. The Road to Amand. After that, the group made their way to the broken horse carriage. The carriage had been blown into the forests on the side of the road, completely overturned upon itself. Furthermore, the iron plating on the roof had been completely dented by the stone great sword, while several detached parts, including the wheels, lay around the surrounding area. It made the entire scene look like a wreckage. There were 2 horses that had been sent flying along with the carriage, but the attendants had already used healing magic to treat them and had led them back to the main road. Liselot gazed upon the ruins with an uncomfortable expression. "How does it look?" she asked Rio. To her amateur eye, it looked damaged beyond repair. "I may be able to do something about this," Rio replied as he looked around at the scattered parts of the carriage. "Right, of course. Wait, what?" Liselot was already nodding reflexively when she processed Rio's answer in complete shock. Rio chuckled at Liselot's surprise. "While I can't do anything about how terrible the carriage itself looks, fortunately the wheels and axles haven't been damaged irreparably. If I make some temporary repairs, it should be able to hold on until you reach Amand." Arya was pleased to see the rare sight of her master's surprise and was smiling along softly. Chloe was also watching Liselot's expression as though she was witnessing a rare sight. Liselot noticed their gazes and cleared her throat in embarrassment. "That is most fortunate indeed. Then I shall begin the repairs immediately. However, repairs of the metal roofing will be impossible to perform here, so may I ask for your permission to cut it off?" "Cut it off?" Rio's question made Liselot tilt her head curiously. "The dent is blocking entry into the carriage and the weight of the steel may cause burden for the carriage itself. I believe it'd be better to lighten the weight, but if it is an issue I can figure something else out." No, that won't be a problem," Liselot said, confused. While she understood his intention, she couldn't figure out how he could perform such a task. "Then, please stand back," Rio said, immediately beginning his work. Drawing the sword at his waist out of its sheath, he approached the overturned carriage. A flash. The steel roofing was cleanly sheared off from the body of the carriage, as though it had been sliced like paper. Liselot and her attendants widened their eyes at the sight. However, the steel plate was too large to cut down all at once, so Rio repeatedly changed locations and swung his sword with skill. Once the steel had been completely detached from the carriage, Liselot somehow managed to voice her thoughts. "Your skill is truly impressive." "It's all thanks to this sword," Rio answered, holding the dwarf-made sword out to show them. "You were controlling the wind with that sword in the battle earlier. That's an enchanted sword, right? And one of an ancient artifact class?" Liselot asked hesitantly. Enchanted swords were broadly defined as swords with sorcery embedded within them, but the precise definition referred to it being ancient sorcery that couldn't be reproduced using modern sorcery. Most people used the word in the narrower sense, but that didn't mean the broader sense of the word wasn't used. The abilities of Rio's sword allowed him to cross swords with a minotaur head-on and fire a finishing blow in the form of a wind blast on par with higher-class magic. It clearly deviated from what could be made with modern sorcery in the Straw region. Thus, Liselot suspected Rio's sword was an enchanted sword in the narrower meaning of the term. However, enchanted swords of an ancient artifact class weren't exactly an item in common circulation, and even if one was on the market, it wouldn't be a price a commoner could afford. Even Liselot only had a few to her name, one of which she had equipped on her confidant, Arya. "A close friend bestowed it upon me. I have been using it carefully," Rio revealed partially, nodding without hesitation. He wanted Liselot to misunderstand the strength he had shown in the earlier fight and attribute it all to the sword. While Rio's sword did have sorcery within it, its true effect was to take the user's spirit arts and wrap it around the sword. Incidentally, that effect also increased the power of the spirit arts. Rio had no intention of spreading the knowledge of spirit arts throughout Straw, so it was more convenient for him to let others believe that he had been fighting with the abilities of the enchanted sword instead. "Oh my, is that so?" Liselot's eyes widened. "At the very least, that means he's someone who can be entrusted with that sword. What a mysterious person. But he's personable, skilled, and he did save us. It would be rude to pry too deeply into him. I hope we can establish some kind of friendly relationship, though," she thought. "All that's left is to reattach the wheels and turn the carriage back up, then perform a final check for any other problems." It is not something you need trouble yourself with, Lady Liselot, if you wish to return to directing others. They seem to be awaiting your orders over there. Rio looked at the road behind them as he spoke to Liselot. At the end of his gaze were several curious attendants watching them. When Liselot noticed the attendants gazing at them from afar, she sighed quietly. Then I shall take my leave. I will leave my attendant Aria here, so please inform her if you need any assistance. Let's go, Chloe. Why yes. Chloe responded in a fluster, following after Liselot. Just before they left, she shot an interested look at Rio. I'm leaving the rest to you, Aria. If you need any more hands, don't hesitate to ask. Liselot winked a discreet wink at Aria with those words before she left. It was most likely in order to analyze Rio while the two of them were alone. Aria understood her master's intent with just a look. She nodded respectfully. Leave it to me. What are you girls loafing around for? Once Liselot and Chloe returned to the main road, Liselot sighed tiredly as she addressed the attendants gathered there. Cosette took a step forward on behalf of the rest. We were waiting for your next orders, Lady Liselot. The knights said they'll be watching our surroundings and gathering the enchanted gems, and we finished healing the wounded people and horses. We've also finished collecting the scattered belongings, she replied with a grin. I see, Liselot replied, a sigh mixed into her voice. They had completed all the duties they were to do, she couldn't really find fault with them. Then, a different attendant, Natalie, stepped forth. Also, regarding the disposal of the great sword stuck in the road, the knight said they would handle that after the collection of enchanted gems. As it seems we lack the hands to move it ourselves. Natalie glanced at the corner of the road as she gave her additional report. There, the Minotaur's stone greatsword was stabbed into the ground. It was roughly 3 meters in diameter. Right, we have to deal with that, too. Liselot recalled the earlier fight as she looked up the stone sword in a daze. In contrast, the attendant girls' gazes were all drawn to the side forest where Rio was repairing the carriage. That really was an impressive fight earlier. Did you manage to find out anything about him? Natalie asked hesitantly, looking at Rio. Even someone as serious as her couldn't help but feel curious about him. That's right. Who exactly is that ridiculously strong and handsome young man? Cosette asked, brimming with curiosity. The other attendant girls also listened intently. Apparently, Chloe's acquaintance, Liselot said nonchalantly. Hey. Chloe hadn't been expecting the sudden spotlight and flinched. Hey, that's not fair, Chloe. Don't hog him all to yourself. Introduce us later, Cosette replied, immediately closing in on Chloe, who just shook her head in a fluster. And no. By acquaintance, he just stayed at my family's inn for a single night in the past. It's not like we're close enough for me to be introducing anyone. Chloe shook her head in a fluster. Oh, really? I think that's more than enough of an excuse to get close to him, though. Do you have any stories from back then? I want to hear more, Cosette pressed, hounding Chloe for more details. That's enough, Cosette. You're bothering Chloe, Natalie chided her with an exasperated look. Honestly, this is why you don't have a single lover, you know? Cosette sighed. What? I don't want to hear that from you. It's not a matter of the more the merrier, you know? Natalie complained with a red face. Okay, enough of that. No one wants to hear you two bicker all day again. Liselot put a stop to the two of them tiredly. Ahaha. The other attendant girls laughed in amusement. Cosette and Natalie exchanged a look before pouting in slight embarrassment. Meanwhile, Chloe's attention was pulled toward Rio as he repaired the carriage in the woods. Her face seemed a little saddened, which made Liselot notice her gloomy mood. What's wrong, Chloe? She asked immediately. No, it's nothing, my lady. Chloe shook her head awkwardly. I know. You used to like him, am I right? Cosette questioned with a teasing grin. Why you wrong? That's not what it is. And anyway, he doesn't seem to remember me. Chloe objected in a fluster, shoulders slumping dejectedly. Her words seemed to trigger even greater curiosity within Cosette. It looks like you'll have to tell us more about what happened. Before that, you girls will distribute drinking water to the knights retrieving the enchanted gems. Then, do one more check for any more fragmented rubble scattered around the area, Liselot said, putting a stop to the chatter. Okay, Grace's group will prepare the water for the knights. That means I'm free to assist Sir Haruto if needed. Cosette replied energetically, looking in Ryo's direction as she offered her help. Liselot shook her head with a smile. Absolutely not. You'll only be in the way if you go. Now, get to work. Meanwhile, Ryo was repairing the carriage with very skilled hands. Since he didn't need any help at the moment, Arya simply watched him work from the side. You really are most proficient at this, she said, the tone of her voice revealing her complete awe. I learned simple carpentry skills during my travels around various places, Ryo replied as he reattached a wheel to the body of the carriage. That's wonderful. You also showed incredible sword skills in the fight earlier. I'm just blessed with a brilliant weapon. You jest. While it is true your enchanted sword is impressive in itself, what I witnessed of the sword user were skills above that. That amount of ability is not something that can be achieved so easily. You must have done some substantial training, no? Arya asked. Thank you very much. I have made sure to keep up my training without fail ever since I was young. I saw that you have excellent skills yourself, Arya. Thank you for the kind words. I was scouted by my lady for my sword skills. Oh, do excuse me. I must be distracting you from your work with this conversation. Arya apologized with a strained smile. Ryo shook his head softly. No, it makes for a nice change of pace. I do not mind continuing, if you are so inclined. Just like how Arya and Liselot were interested in Ryo was also curious about Liselot and Celia's old friend, Arya. He wanted to talk to her while they were alone. Of course, it would be my pleasure, Arya agreed readily. Then, may I ask you something regarding what you said before? Arya nodded. Sure. Have you been working for Lady Liselot for a while? You could say that. I believe it's been about 5 years since I officially started working for her. Arya replied as she reflected on the past. 5 years ago. That was before Amand went through its huge growth advancement, right? Yes. It was shortly before my master took on her position as Amand's governor, right as the Rika Guild was being established. Although we actually became acquainted before that. Ryo paused in his work for a moment and smiled pleasantly at her. Then it sounds like you really are Lady Liselot's most trusted confidant. I would like to think that, Arya said, a somewhat uneasy smile on her face. Speaking of which, Sir Haruto, you mentioned that you visited Amand several years ago. Perhaps we have passed by each other before, she said with a smile. That's possible. I only stayed for a single night, but when I visited again recently I was shocked to see how much the city had developed in only a few years. Ryo replied, resuming his work. It's an honor to hear that. Ever since being appointed as governor, my master has been putting her all into the development of the city. I've traveled through many places, but I do believe Amand is amazing. It has been such a pleasant place to visit, that I find myself stopping by more frequently as of late. Oh, is that so? If my lady were to hear that, she would be most pleased. Arya bowed happily to Ryo. Then please, do inform her. I have especially been in the care of the Rika Guild for all my shopping, Ryo said with a grin. At that, Arya smiled. I will make sure to let her know, she replied in her melodic voice. On that note, if I may ask purely out of my own curiosity, have you been traveling for a long time, Sir Haruto? From what I can see, you still seem to be in your mid to late teens. Ryo thought for a brief moment before deciding to mix truth and falsehood in his answer. Yes, I've been traveling from the age of 11. I am 16 right now, so that would make my journey roughly 5 years long. I believe the first time I visited Amand was around 4 years ago. Now that he had encountered Flora and the others unexpectedly, he added some fake points into his timeline, just in case. From such a young age. I also became an adventurer at a young age, but I was a few years older than that. Actually, at the age of 11, you wouldn't be able to register as an adventurer, would you? Arya asked, eyes widening slightly. The Adventurers Guild had a general rule that one had to be at the age of 12 or above to register as an adventurer. Yes. Or rather, I still haven't registered as an adventurer even now. It wasn't something particularly necessary for me to travel around various kingdoms. That is why my main source of income was from liquidating the enchanted gems dropped by monsters I defeated along the way in the name of training, Ryo explained, revealing the fact he wasn't an adventurer. The Adventurer Guild was an international organization established by consignment of each kingdom. The original goal of the establishment was to force those unfit for working in regular society into the short-staffed national defense, putting them indirectly under the management of the kingdom and making them do labor effectively. However, the international organization was in name only. While the organization headquarters formally did exist, its management was conducted by independent branches in each kingdom. The reason for this was each kingdom needed to dispatch their own official to supervise the branch operations, which made it impossible to cross national barriers. Furthermore, becoming an adventurer required registration at either the branch office or main headquarters, each with their own advantages and disadvantages. For example, joining a branch office meant restrictions against working under other branches. In this regard, joining the headquarters meant ability to move freely between branches. True, while joining a guild as an adventurer does grant benefits from the organization, it also means that your actions may also become restricted. I've heard of people who dislike that and choose not to become adventurers, too, Arya said eloquently. Who is he? What is he traveling for? The mysteries keep growing deeper with him, she thought at the same time. That should do it. I'm going to move the carriage back upright now, so please stand back a little, Rio said, having reattached the wheel successfully. That must be difficult to do alone. Allow me to help, Arya offered. Rio shook his head. No, the physical body enhancement of this sword is enough for me to manage alone. All the more for me to help. I have also been entrusted with an enchanted sword from my master, so please leave it to me, Arya said, refusing to back down. After being left here with the purpose of assisting, she didn't feel it was right to leave everything to Rio. I'll be fine, so please continue to be on guard of our surroundings, Rio said, holding his right hand out and placating Arya from taking action. However, Arya paused on her feet. The knights have already been doing that for a while now, she thought regretfully. She knew that Rio had to be more than aware that the knights were patrolling the area. That was why Arya thought he was probably offering her an excuse to take a break. After that, Rio held his sword in his left hand and swung it in a show of drawing out the sword's power when he was actually using his own spirit arts to strengthen his body. Up we go. Rio immediately dropped the sword and used both hands to grip the carriage firmly, lifting it easily. Arya's eyes widened faintly. Splendid, she complimented. The attendants and knights nearby on the road were also taken aback, their gazes stolen by the sight of Rio lifting the carriage. All I did it was lift it up. It's the enchanted sword's doing, Rio said to Arya, implying their reactions were over the top. No, maintaining the enhancement after releasing the sword requires advanced control of your magic essence. And yet, you are doing that so easily. When continuous sorcery like physical body enhancement was activated via magic artifact, it was generally quite difficult to maintain that sorcery after releasing the artifact. On top of that, the types of artifacts that required essence manipulation to activate the sorcery rather than a verbal spell chant tended to fluctuate erratically in performance. That characteristic was especially notable in ancient artifact class enchanted swords with high-level sorcery embedded within. If the user's control of magic essence was lacking, they wouldn't be able to bring out the full potential of the artifact, in some cases failing to even activate the sorcery. While Arya could perform the same stunt as Rio now, when she first received the enchanted sword from Liselot, she had to go through rigorous training to be able to use it fully. At the very least, she couldn't do it at Rio's age. It was proof that Rio had that high of a control over his magic essence, or so Arya had judged. Well, it has been 2 years since I started using this sword, Rio said, gazing into the distant sky vacantly. While he had to adjust his story in order to hide the existence of spirit arts, in doing so he realized how much time had passed and felt nostalgic. The impression Arya received from peering at Rio's profile was both mature and childish at the same time, making her eyes widen with curiosity. I'm going to check for any abnormalities with the wheels on the other side. If there are no other issues, it can be carried to the road, Rio said, rounding to the other side of the carriage that had been facing the ground earlier. For a brief instant, he glanced at Arya's face. Arya, her. It's the same name that the professor mumbled earlier, so she must be the same person. She doesn't seem like a bad person either. But for some reason, both her name and face feel familiar somehow, he thought, feeling rather peculiar. In the end, the carriage was deemed to have escaped from any irreparable damage. Upon returning to the main road, Arya immediately reported to Liselott, who was cleaning the area with the other attendant girls. "My lady, the emergency repairs on the horse carriage have been completed." Liselott's expression brightened. "Really? Wait, and you even brought it all the way here?" When she spotted Rio clutching a rope and towing the carriage behind him, she was slightly astonished. "Sorry for the wait," Rio said to Liselott, pulling the carriage onto the road. "I do apologize, Sir Haruto, for making you transport the carriage after repairing it." Liselott bowed her head at Rio apologetically. "No, Arya also helped push from behind for most of the way. I borrowed the power of my enchanted sword, too, so it was much easier to handle than the attack from the Minotaur," Rio joked, shaking his head. "Why, how reliable you are," Liselott giggled. Cosette suddenly approached, politely offering Rio a wooden mug to drink from. "Sir Haruto, please accept something to drink." It was brimming with a sweet fruit juice inside. "Oh, thank you very much for the offer." Rio bowed, thanking her pleasantly but finding himself lacking knowledge of her name. "Do forgive me. My name is Cosette. I'm an attendant serving Lady Liselott." Cosette pinched the hem of her attendant uniform and curtsied in an elegant manner. PFF. Liselott and Arya, who were familiar with Cosette's true form, were just barely able to hold back their laughter at the sight of her enthusiasm. "Thank you very much, Miss Cosette," Rio said cheerfully, having not noticed the expressions of the other two twitching with laughter. "I would also like to thank you for what you did for us earlier. It may be impudent of me to speak out like this, but I wanted to convey my gratitude." "Please forgive my rudeness," Cosette said, lowering her head deep in a show of respect. Rio tilted his head with a troubled look. "It was nothing. And I am not a noble, so you do not need to act so formally with me. I cannot accept that. My master owes Sir Haruto her life. Now, I shall take my leave from here. Thank you for your time." Cosette shook her head gracefully and bowed her head before turning. With that clear message conveyed, she turned and left with the grace of a swan. Seeing Cosette and Arya, "It seems all your attendants are very well trained, Lady Liselott," Rio said in awe. "No, well, thank you." Liselott nodded her head with a frown. Shortly after that, the knights that were on patrol for enchanted gems and possible threats started to return one by one. Once the knights were rehydrated, Duke Huguenot came over as well. They decided they would attempt to move the Minotaur sword that was obstructing passage through the road. "Now, let us move this to the side of the road. I was the one who threw it at the ground. If you would like, I could retrieve it myself," Rio suggested. Wouldn't that be a little too difficult for you to do alone? I believe catching it in the air and swinging it is a much different burden to lifting it off the ground," Duke Huguenot stated logically. "Allow me to make an attempt first, then," Rio said, squeezing the handle of his still-sheathed sword and making a show of swinging it as though to draw out the enchanted power. He walked closer to the great sword, grabbing the stone sword that was several times taller than him. With a small breath, he exerted his strength. The great sword that was pierced into the ground creaked as it started to lift up. After a moment, it was pulled completely free. "Oh!" Cheers rose around Rio. "It's dangerous, so please stand back." Unfortunately, the blade was rather long, so Rio warned the knights and attendant girls nearby to be careful. Liselott watched Rio with wide eyes. "Could you do the same thing?" she asked Arya, who stood beside her. "I won't know until I try it for myself, but I believe it should be possible," Arya replied quietly. "Oi oi, it sure is rowdy out here." Hiroaki appeared from the carriage. Apparently all the noise had caught his attention. Flora spotted Rio holding the stone great sword and widened her eyes as she mumbled in awe. "It seems Sir Haruto is carrying that sword." Meanwhile, Hiroaki's eyes landed on the same scene. He stared at Rio, gathering the attention with a rather indifferent look in his eyes. I see." Still carrying the great sword, Rio slowly walked over to the forest at the side of the road. The knights and attendants murmured to themselves as they watched him do so. "Oh, great. Now they're all in an uproar. Sure must be nice, being attractive. It's like living life in easy mode, having people fawn over you just for carrying something heavy." Hiroaki thought with an unamused face as he looked at the attendant girls fussing nearby. Even Liselot was watching Rio with a look of awe on her face. Hiroaki found that fact the most unpleasant of all. In that time, Rio made it to the forest with the stone sword in hand and gently laid it down on its side in the forest. Hiroaki sighed exasperatedly. I guess it's time to show them the power of a true hero. He set off, walking towards Rio casually. When Liselot noticed that Hiroaki had alighted from the carriage, she called out to him. Hiro, just watch this, Hiroaki said with a smug look, heading towards the side of the road where Rio was. Rio had just stood up after his work was done and was turning on his heel to head back. He noticed Hiroaki approaching and tilted his head. Oh. Hello, Hiro. Is something the matter? I was just wondering how heavy that stone sword was. Just lend it to me for a sec. Hiroaki smirked with a huff, grabbing the sword Rio had laid on the floor with both hands. With an audible grunt, he attempted to lift it up. Then, though he swayed uneasily for a moment, Hiroaki managed to hold the stone great sword up perfectly. Ooh! The knights raised their voices in a cheer. Roanna immediately got close, too. Why, that's splendid, Sir Hiroaki. It's a little hard to carry because of its size, but I guess this should do it. It's no big deal. Hiroaki smiled smugly, full of confidence in himself. The way he holds his body is completely amateur, but his enhanced abilities show promise. If he has this much strength, then he's probably stronger than the average knight, so it makes sense that he would be confident in his strength. But, is this spirit arts? Rio analyzed to himself, eyes widening. That is very impressive, Hiro, he praised Hiroaki as he pondered. Ha ha ha. Well, you're not so bad yourself. Let's go back. Hiroaki lowered the stone greatsword back to where it was and patted Rio on the shoulder before heading back to the carriage at a brisk walk. Roanna accompanied him. Her chest was puffed up proudly at all the attention gathered on Hiroaki. Rio's lips upturned in a smile as he followed the two of them from behind. Hiroaki made a beeline for Liselot and called out to her, obviously in a good mood. Come on Liselot, let's go. Get in the carriage. You too, Flora. He included Flora as an immediate afterthought. Yes. Flora replied first. Liselot nodded respectfully, glancing at Rio. Understood. Then, may Sir Haruto accompany us? We'll be heading towards Amand next. I also have business in Amand, so I have no reason to object. But are you sure you want to let me in the carriage with you? Rio asked, watching their party's expression observantly. His social standing wasn't appropriate to be riding with a hero, princess, duke, and two noble ladies. Normally, he wouldn't even be permitted to ride with regular nobles. There's no need to feel any kind of reservation. You did save all of our lives earlier, after all, Duke Huguenot said, smiling merrily. That's right, Sir Haruto. We also wanted to give our formal thanks, so please, you are more than welcome to join us, Liselot said, bowing her head deeply. Rio tried to stop Liselot in a fluster. No, please raise your head, Lady Liselot. Yeah, he's right. Someone as great as you shouldn't be bowing your head so easily, Hiroaki agreed. Do excuse me for my behavior, then. Liselot said with a frown, looking at Rio. Now, let's get going already. Come on, Hiroaki said, heading towards the carriage first. Thus, Rio followed Liselot and the others to Amand. Liselot led Rio to the carriage. He hesitantly stepped inside. Excuse me. The interior of the carriage was spacious and could fit 8 people when seated together. There, Hiroaki, Flora, Roanna and Duke Huguenot took their seats first. Hiroaki looked at Rio entering late. Well, have a seat, he said with a pompous air. Sir Haruto, please sit on this side. Liselot motioned to the highest remaining seat. Thank you for the hospitality. Rio bowed politely before sitting down. Liselot chose one seat down from Rio's before sitting down too. It was the furthest from Hiroaki, who was seated in the highest position. Hiroaki looked a little displeased at being further away from Liselot, but he crossed his legs calmly. So who are you, really? A noble from somewhere? He asked Rio. At that, Flora flinched. Sir Hiroaki, asking such questions like that out of the blue. It's rude to Sir Haruto, she said to Hiroaki nervously, looking at Ryo. Oi oi, are you telling me we didn't let him onto the carriage just to ask that? We should just cut to the chase for this kind of thing. Hiroaki gave an exaggerated shrug of his shoulders. However, Flora watched Ryo's expression worriedly as she stumbled over her words. There was a proper manner and procedure for which such things should be done, so when those of higher status ignored the rules, it made it harder for others to speak up. That was how a society built on status operated, after all. With a faint smile, Ryo shook his head to show he wasn't bothered. Please, there is no need to concern yourselves over me. It is true my background hasn't been made clear to you. Well, from the looks of things, you're just a swordsman traveling around while training your sword skills. A typical cliché setting, but that's what makes it all the more suspicious. The guys outside were hasty to make a fuss about you, but I'd like to learn a bit more about your background before I trust you completely, Hiroaki stated bluntly, addressing Ryo. Meanwhile, Lizelot found herself fighting the urge to ignore their status difference and interrupt several times. He's basically declaring his distrust towards him. Isn't that a bit too rude towards the one who saved you? Even if you want to ask more, there should be a way to go about asking politely. His manners are all over the place, but she had no choice but to stay silent. It would probably be best to thank him for the earlier fight at a later time without Hiroaki around, anyway. With that thought, Lizelot kept up the smile on her face. Naturally, I don't expect everyone to believe me so easily either. But unfortunately, I do not possess anything that can objectively prove my identity, Ryo said with a frown. Well, the level of civilization in this world is what it is. If only you had something with a noble house crest on it, then you could prove yourself, Hiroaki said, asking in a roundabout way whether he was a noble or not. As I said in the beginning, I am not a noble. If anything, I am a mere wanderer, a nomad that travels without a particular kingdom to call home, Ryo said as truthfully as he could. So that's why you're traveling everywhere? Hiroaki asked, looking at Ryo doubtfully. Yes. Ryo nodded curtly. But doesn't your speech and behavior seems to be rather educated for a wanderer? Hiroaki asked, looking at Roanna. He had heard from her earlier about how Ryo's mannerisms didn't seem like that of a regular commoner. I'm honored that you think so. But it is merely a life skill I picked up along the way. Because I am a wanderer, I have to endeavor to live peacefully with people no matter where I go, Ryo said with a respectful bow. Ha ha ha. Well, you do seem to be able to speak well. I don't know how nomads and refugees are treated in this world, to be honest, but actually, how are they treated, really? Hiroaki asked those around him with a cheerful grin. It's not that they're a target of aggressive discrimination, it's just that they may be treated as inferior to locals that live in the area. That's why there are many people who do not feel any attachment for the land and end up wandering from place to place, Duke Huguenot, the eldest present and most well-versed with the world, answered. Ah, I see. So that's how it is. Well, I get it. That's a problem that exists in my world too. Sure causes lots of headaches. There may be talented people among refugees, but they can't be treated with favoritism over the actual citizens of the nation. The more they stand out, the more the inferior locals will envy them, too, Hiroaki said in comprehension. You are most knowledgeable, Sir Hiroaki, Roanna said with a breath of awe. Hey, it's no big deal. But I guess that does give some credit to your story about traveling around the world, more or less. Hiroaki smirked smugly and looked at Ryo. I appreciate your kindness. Ryo forced a smile on his face and bowed his head politely. Well, you don't seem like a bad guy. I suppose you can pass. At the very least, you now have a hero's stamp of approval of being trustworthy. Hiroaki laughed heartily as he spoke. That is an honor indeed. Once more, Ryo bowed his head in a polite manner. Meanwhile, outside the carriage where Ryo was riding with the others. Say, Arya. You spoke with Sir Haruto a little, right? What was he like? Cosette asked Arya enthusiastically. At that, Natalie and Chloe, who had been walking nearby, also closed in on Cosette and Arya to eavesdrop on their conversation. Arya felt the curiosity of her subordinates as clear as day. It seems he is 1 year older than Our Lady, but he seems very calm and mature for his age. He mentioned that he has been traveling for years now, she replied with a sigh. Cosette and Natalie were both veteran attendants too. Arya was their leader as the head of the attendants, but their long years of working together made them more akin to equal colleagues. Anything else? Like his ideal woman or something? Cosette asked further, expression brimming with interest. There's no way I could ask something so intrusive in such a short conversation, Arya said with a tired look. But that's like something you can observe when you're close up to him, no? Does he look like the type who likes quiet and graceful girls, or bright and talkative girls? Cosette continued with a teasing wink. Unfortunately, I do not possess such observational skills. Arya shook her head curtly. Oh my, I'm not sure I believe that, Cosette objected. For example, doesn't the hero seem like he would prefer girls that are meek and obedient? Of course, they have to be extremely attractive first, but still, that's disrespectful. What would you do if someone overheard that? Natalie interrupted in a panic. Oh, were you listening? Eavesdropping isn't very nice of you, Cosette responded bluntly. I was just walking nearby, of course I would overhear you. Natalie winced as she argued back. Well, I knew you were listening anyway. It's fine, I'm keeping my voice quiet enough that it won't reach the knight's ears. I'm barely changing my expression, too, Cosette said with a shrug. True, that wasn't a rather scathing criticism coming from you, right? In reality, he's an overconfident and intrusive man. Like the dim-witted son of a noble who mistook his family's money and power for his own talent. That's what I would have liked to have said instead, Cosette thought, but didn't actually voice out loud. Well, that aside, I'm sure you agree with my statement even a little in order to respond with what you did, no? Cosette grinned at Natalie. That's not true. He's an amazing person. He picked up the Minotaur's sword earlier, after all. Natalie answered with a squeak in her voice. That may be true, but was there a need for him to pick it up at that point? Cosette cocked her head doubtfully. The attendant girls had nothing to say in response. Back in the carriage with Rio and the others, nearly an hour had passed since their departure when someone knocked on the window of the carriage. Lady Liselot, do you have a moment? Arya's voice could be heard calling for Liselot from outside. Liselot opened the carriage window. What's the matter? She asked. Amand has come into view. We will be arriving soon, Arya reported, giving Liselot only the necessary amount of information. We're already here? Liselot's expression froze over. Is something the matter, my lady? Arya asked curiously. No, it's nothing. I was so immersed in conversation, I hadn't realized how much time had passed, Liselot answered brightly, having regained her smile. In the end, I wasn't able to speak to Sir Haruto at all because of the hero, she thought to herself. Hiroaki had dominated the entire conversation while they were moving. No matter what she spoke about, Hiroaki would immediately latch onto the topic and bring it in his own direction. Thanks for the report, Liselot said to Arya, quietly closing the window. Are we at Amand already? Hiroaki paused the conversation to ask Liselot. Yes. It should be any moment now, so please get ready. Liselot repeated what she was told with a smile. Ha ha ha. You say that, but we don't have any belongings. Hiroaki laughed cheerily. Liselot returned his laugh with a forced one of her own before she made her move in the lull of conversation. Incidentally, Sir Haruto, do you have any plans after this? If it is to your convenience, I would love to invite you to my estate, she turned to Rio and asked. Rio frowned apologetically. Please accept my apologies. I know it is rude to refuse the invitation of a noble, but unfortunately I have a rather urgent appointment to get to in Amand, he said humbly. Liselot also frowned apologetically. No, it's my fault for inviting you out of the blue. Then, would you be free to visit my estate on another day, she offered instead. Yes. If you are so willing, then it would be my pleasure. Liselot sighed in relief. Then, it is decided. Thank you for going along with my whims, she said happily. No, I should be the one thanking you for the invitation, Rio returned with a well-mannered bow. Will you be staying in Amand for a while, Sir Haruto? Yes, that is my intention. And have you decided on your lodgings? No, the plan was to decide once I had met up with my company in Amand. In that case, allow me to welcome you to one of the inns under the Ricker Guild's management, Liselot said. While she was more than happy to have him and his company stay at her estate together, This was the more courteous offer to make after he had refused once already. Being too pushy would just make her seem more rude. I am grateful for your offer, but Rio hesitated in giving a clear answer. Considering it was an invitation, the accommodation was probably owned by Liselot, and there was a high chance of it being a rather high-class stay. It's the least I could do to show my gratitude. Won't you please consider accepting? It would also make it much easier for me to send a messenger too, Liselot explained with a wry smile. Rio could have chosen to reject this proposal too, but after a moment of thought, I understand. I shall take you up on your offer, then. There will be 3 people, including me, 2 of which are women who don't mind rooming together. If you could please take that into consideration, he said respectfully, bowing his head. Now that he had told her he was staying in Amand, he couldn't go and set up his stone house outside Amand anymore. Considering how this removed the hassle of searching for an inn, it seemed like a favorable trade-off. Most importantly, having Liselot aware of his location would also be beneficial. Understood. I will make preparations accordingly. Thank you very much. I should be free at any time from tomorrow onward. I look forward to it, Liselot said, lowering her head respectfully. I see you've been playing around, too, what with 2 ladies accompanying you. Nice. Hiroaki grinned at Rio. After that, Hiroaki dominated the conversation once more, monopolizing the topics to his whim.